which is very militaristic, outgoing. You have an expansion of NATO up to Russia's borders. Jeff and I were just met with Mr. Medvedev's group in Yaroslavl a few months ago, where they were discussing the same problem. And there's a kind of whistling in the dark going on about what if money is really all about stability, the kind of stability we had in the Great Moderation, which I guess most of you call the bubble economy. The idea is to stop most of that, and essentially you're having the whole era that began in 1945 ending. And in this era, remember, interest rates were very low, about 2% after World War II. From 1945 until 1980, interest rates rose steadily through the Carter administration, whose military adventurism capped that of the Vietnam War. Interest rates peaked at 20% for the prime loans of banks. This was the highest rate since Mesopotamia. And during that whole 35-year period, there was a chronic bear market for bonds. In other words, when interest rates go up, bond prices go down for existing bonds. So most mutual funds and most investments most savings are in bonds, not in stocks. And when interest rates go up, the capitalization rate is reduced, and so you had the bond market going down, the stock market going down, the real estate market came down. Until my former boss's boss at Chase Manhattan Bank, Paul Volcker, raised the interest rates. Then came the Reagan administration. And from 1980 to last year, you've had a reversal. You've had interest rates going down steadily year after year from 20% to 0.25%. I guess, and you can, bank customers can borrow at 2% now. What has occurred now that the U.S. has gone off gold, and remember, the U.S. went off gold in 1971 because of the Vietnam War. Every week, when I was working at Chase Manhattan Bank in the 1960s, on Friday afternoon, the Federal Reserve would report the gold cover of the dollar. How much gold was covered by the dollar, which is required at that time to have a 25% gold backing. And you could see it going down and down and down every time that Charles de Gaulle would make a wonderful speech about America's military adventurism and the idiocy of the Americans. The Germans were cashing in even more gold without making the speeches of it, although they would talk at the International Monetary Fund meetings. So it was obvious that the dollar would go off gold, and it did in 1971 when America said, we're out of gold, we can't cover, there's no more money to cover the dollars, we're not selling gold to the gold pool anymore, and the dollar plunged by 10% as part of Governor Connolly's move there. A year later, I published a book that my publisher called Super Imperialism. I wanted to call it Monetary Imperialism, but the publisher had gone to school with a communist and his a roommate and liked the idea of tying it into that. But despite the title, the largest number of copies, 2,000, was bought by the Defense Department and the CIA as a How to Do It book. Herman Kahn at the Hudson Institute, no relation, we were both named after the river, basically said, quit academia. You hope as a teacher that one of your students someday is going to be in government and in a position of influence. You don't need to do that. I'll triple your salary, quit the teaching, and I'll take you to the White House next week. And whoever's president, the idea is to be their advisor. You don't have to be their teacher. You can just be their advisor and come in at the top. And I realized that sounded perfectly logical, so I quit, joined the Hudson Institute. The first big contract we had was from the Defense Department for $85,000 to go to them and explain to them how, as Herman Kahn said, we've pulled the biggest ripoff in history. Now we pay other countries, when we run a deficit, we pay them in treasury bills they have to finance our deficit. And the deficit in the 1960s, from 1950 to 1970, the entire U.S. private sector was exactly in balance. The entire balance of payments deficit of America was military spending. And so essentially, when you talked about the deficit and foreign central reserves, now they couldn't get gold, they had to pay dollars, they had to buy dollars. The dollars they bought were U.S. Treasury IOUs run up because of the military deficit. And the Pentagon then said, you've shown us how to be good imperialists. Thank you. They need academics to somehow explain to them how the ripoff is occurring, and that's been their policy basically ever since. So there are a number of myths during reality. The big, once you have reached a point where the debt has expanded, even though they've lowered the interest rates to mortgage rates in America you can now get for 4.5%. They're really the lowest they've been in almost since 1950. You can't lower interest rates anymore. So you can't have, and certainly for bonds, you can't have a lower interest rate in bonds. I think Treasury bills are yielding 0.1% in the United States. If you buy bonds, there is no way that you can make a gain on them because you can't lower the interest rate below 0.1%. Why are people buying it? Because they realize that the game is over and the corporations can't pay their debts. 1/4 of American real estate is in negative equity, meaning the mortgages are larger than the property is worth. So people are walking away. There are new terms in the English language. Ever since Shakespeare, the language has been expanded. We have new term like jingle mail in America. Means you mail the keys back to the bank and walk away from the property, leaving the bank to foreclose on it. Because in America and Canada, unlike Europe, the bank has only the house is collateral and the land, not personal liability. But in Europe, there's personal liability. Jeff mentioned that we'd both been working in Latvia. In Latvia, they not only is there personal liability for debt, Latvia had the biggest real estate bubble in Europe, which is why it was called a success story, and even more stability because its wages have gone down 30%. Stability in Latvia means 1/3 of the population between 20 and 35 years old plans to emigrate in the next 5 years. Just like stability for Iceland. Since the last census, 8% of the Iceland's 300,000 population have moved abroad, mainly to Norway. Stability means depopulation and depression and chronic depression as long as the eye can see until the debts are annulled. So this is the kind of stability that you're having now. The question is, how long can this be? Well, obviously, this is an inherently unstable population. You can't have the whole world's population move to China and Australia, which are the success stories. So the feeling of most investors is take the money and run. Most money managers are putting their money in treasury bills or German bonds. Government bonds are now yielding 2%, which is hardly anything. All people are trying to do is prevent themselves from losing money and to keep what they've taken. In the United States, the government, you have all this talking about by the Republicans about needing to cut back government debt. Since September of 2008, when the Lehman Brothers went under, the government has created $13 trillion in bailout money to the private sector, mainly under the Obama administration. And Obama now says, in order to pay the banks, you have to cut back Social Security. You have to cut back medical care. Obama has taken the same position as there is in Europe. His objective is to lower wages by 30%, increase unemployment to 20%, get rid of Social Security by privatizing it, meaning turning your Social Security account over to Citibank, over to Bank of America, over to Chase Manhattan, over to the very banks that have just ripped off the economy with the biggest criminalization in history. And that is the other aspect, I should say, of our Kansas City group. One of our professors of law, Bill Black, was the prosecutor for the savings and loan ripoff in the the 1980s. In the 1980s, 2,000 financial bankers were sent to jail as the FBI charged 20,000 bankers with criminal fraud. In the United States now, there's been only one money manager sent to jail. And that was a man who was not prosecuted, but who walked into police headquarters with his hands up saying, "I surrender." That was Bernie Madoff. Under Obama's deal with Wall Street, he appointed an attorney general who's in charge of the prosecutions, Eric Holder, who promised not to send any banker to jail for criminal fraud. Eric Holder said the free market is we get to screw the Europeans, we get to screw Asians, we get to cheat everybody. There is no law against fraud anymore. We are not going to send anybody to jail. Please give us your campaign contributions. And Mr. Obama has got more campaign contributions than anybody else, which is why he's assured to be reelected to continue it. He appointed a Treasury Secretary who, the day before he was Treasury Secretary, settled the AIG insurance bankruptcy by giving Goldman Sachs $29 billion to pay for the cross-defense swaps that they made in their mutual gambles. Goldman won, AIG went bankrupt. Instead of saying we're wiping out all of AIG's gambles and just keeping the regular insurance business, Geithner gave $29 billion to Goldman Sachs. And Goldman Sachs has bought the right to, in America we sell the rights to nominate who's the head of the every congressional committee and every position. Goldman Sachs has the right to name the Treasury Secretary. So they said, we want the guy who just gave us $29 billion. Obama said, okay, you give me campaign contribution. I'm appointing Geithner as the guy. He's the current Treasury Secretary. And it goes right down the line. The American financial economy is as corrupt as Russia's economy. And there's nothing anyone can do about it until they change the system. The Americans' position is, you try to change the system, we'll wreck your economy. So this is why if you're looking at finance, you're looking at coinage, you're looking at the means of settlement, remember, all money is a means of paying debt. And the debts are usually not money that people have borrowed for productive reasons. Banks in America don't lend to companies. They lend to other financial institutions. The credit they create is not to not for tangible capital formation, not to build factories, not to employ people, but essentially to buy assets that are rising in value. So essentially, 80% of bank loans in America are mortgage loans. This is what's inflated the bubble here. And the American credit creation, the bubble economy, the great moderation, is what has expanded the bubble economy throughout the rest of the world and created the real estate bubble. Now that they've done the bubble, the banks are trying to say, well, we will wreck the economy if you don't bail us out. And obviously, this can't go on long. They're simply trying to take the money and run, to take as many bonuses and options and salaries